we can praise your name, and not just praise it, but praise it together. And that's always a good day. We're thankful for the rain. It reminds us that you will provide the things that we need. And we pray for those that have greater needs than we do, for the folks in the South, in Texas and in Florida that are either cleaning up from or bracing for the latest round of weather. We just pray that you would protect, and that these things would cause folks to draw near to you. This morning, we ask you to, one more time, show us just how much you love us and help us to respond to that love in a way that brings you glory. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a seat. It is good to be with you again this week. So we'll get one thing out of the way. Go Hawks. That's right. I put on a plaid shirt this morning, and it's plaid shirt day. I don't know. A lot of you guys got the memo, evidently. You know how that is? Like you walk around, you're like, wait, where all these people have plaid shirts on, right? Jody's got one on, Ron's got one, all these people. Plaid shirts. If you don't have a plaid shirt on, it's okay. You're just probably on the wrong email list. We'll get you straightened out. Pastor Joe is gone for the next few weeks. He's been gone for a couple of weeks, resting after all the camp action that he had to deal with, which was a lot. And he's getting older. That's all I have to say about that. Well, that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's put it that way, right? No, but he's leaving. He's going to Greece. He leaves Tuesday morning. They fly out. Now, I want you to do me a favor and pray for him every day for the next 2 weeks. That's how long he's going to be in Greece. And the reason is because he's going to be preaching to a whole bunch of missionaries when he's there. He showed me kind of the itinerary he has. And this guy does not know how to vacation. He's only got one day that he's actually not going to be preaching to somebody or working with missionaries in some way. And on that one day, there's not a theme park anywhere to be seen. So I don't know what his deal is, but he hasn't got it really figured out what real vacationing is. This is really more of a working thing that he's doing, and do pray for him. If you don't know, he's going to Greece. We have a couple of missionaries that are International Mission Board missionaries. That means that they are ordained and resourced by the International Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention. So that's the convention that our church belongs to. So a certain percentage of money that we send as an offering to like our Lottie Moon offering, Christmas offering, helps support international missions. And we work cooperatively through the cooperative program, and that's what helps provide money for these missionaries. Well, anyway, these missionaries, Tim is kind of the leader of a bunch of missionaries and a whole team of people that aren't even missionaries but are helping out, that are dealing with the refugee crisis coming out of Syria. You guys have heard there's all this turmoil in the Middle East, and a lot of people are fleeing out of their homeland with nothing more than just themselves, no luggage or anything. They're getting into these little tiny boats that are designed to hold just a few people, and hundreds of people are trying to come across the Mediterranean Sea. A lot of them don't make it. It's really a sad and tragic story, but they're taking this huge risk, and the main entry point for these refugees is in Greece. And so Tim and his team are meeting them on the shore. And you got to understand, when they get off the boat, they've just been through a terrific and horrific experience. And they're meeting him there, and they're helping him. They're reaching out and encouraging him. Most of these folks are Muslims. And here are all these Christian folks that are like, here, look, here's like a little bathroom pack to help you, and here we're going to help you and introduce you to teach you what you need to do in order to be able to either sojourn through Greece or to establish yourself in Greece. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we're doing to help, and it's a great testimony to the faithfulness of Jesus and the love of Jesus for these people that are utterly and completely destitute. They have nothing. And so pray for Pastor Joe as he works them. It's an interesting, he was telling me that a lot of the people that are working in the center that receives these immigrants are people that are formerly, they came out of Islam. So they're like Iraqis and Iranians and different people like that have been converted to Christianity, and God's working in their lives. And it's an exciting thing to think about, that opportunity to share with folks. So he's going to be gone for a couple weeks, and you're going to pray for him every day, right? Just put it, like a reminder on your phone. Pray for Pastor Joe. Pray for Pastor Joe. And I'm sure he'll appreciate that very, very much. So we've been working through the book of Ruth while he's been gone. We're on week 3, which means chapter 3. And if you've been reading through the book of Ruth, and I hope you have, I asked you to do this starting 2 weeks ago, and I mentioned it again last week. I'm going to mention it this week and next week, and even on our 5th week, I'm still going to challenge you to do this. I want you to read one chapter of Ruth every day. That's easy to do. It takes about 10 minutes. You read a chapter, and then, you come and you tell me what God has taught you in that, right? And when you get done, so you'll read, there's 4 chapters, right? Ruth 1, 2, 3, 4. So you'll read 4 chapters, and then you start over with chapter 1. You can switch translations if you want. You can read it again in the same translation, highlight different things. You can do all kinds of stuff. I want you to do that. And the reason why is because I think this book is rich with just great truth that inspires us to live the lives that we were created to live. Now, to catch you up, if this is your first Sunday, I want to give you a little bit of a, kind of the background of where we're going to be talking about in chapter 3. I got to be honest, I've been in some ways dreading chapter 3 since I decided to do this study in Ruth. Let's just say that chapter 3 gets kind of dicey. And Ruth turns up the romance to level 11 in chapter 3. And I'm already, Warren's back there. I'm just nervous. All right, so we're going to get to that. We're going to be okay. All right, we're going to be okay. So what the backstory is this. So there was a woman named Naomi and her husband whose name was Elimelech. And they had 2 great kids. One was named Mahon, the other one was Chilion, right? 2, what we say, Klingon names, live long and prosper names. No one names their kids that anymore because they literally translate sick and dying. So that's they moved out of Bethlehem during the time of the famine. Now this was during the age of the judges, and so there was a lot of bad things happening. God's hand was against the Israelite nation during that time, and there was a famine, and so they moved out of Bethlehem. They moved away from God's presence and God's people to the land of Moab, now the Moabites. Now, the Moabites are the children of an incestuous relationship between Lot and his daughters. His daughters decided one night to get him drunk, and then they lay with him, the Bible says, you figure it out, and then they got pregnant, and one of the children's name was Moab. And so there's a storied, checkered past for the Moabites, especially when it comes to the nation of Israel. They just don't like each other very much. And so when Elimelech moved his family out of Bethlehem into Moab, it was one of those just bad decisions that rapidly became worse. What happened was Mahon and Chilion married a couple of Moabite women, expressly forbidden by God to marry, and they did anyway. They married these Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. And shortly after that, it was a period of time went by, about 10 years. I guess it wasn't that shortly afterward. About 10 years go by, and Elimelech dies, Mahon dies, and Chilion dies. So all 3 men are dead, and so you have Naomi, the mother, and Ruth and Orpah, the daughters-in-law, are now the grieving widows, and they're broke, and they're homeless, and they have no husbands, and it couldn't get any worse than it is right now. Or could it? And so Naomi looks at Ruth and Orpah and says, you guys, here's what you need. I'm going to go back to Bethlehem and see what I can do there. My suggestion to you is go back to your families in Moab, go back to your God in Moab, and we'll leave each other's company. Orpah has a tearful goodbye with Naomi and leaves and goes back to her family. And Ruth, through the direction of God, chooses to stay with Naomi. You remember that famous passage where she says, your people will be my people, your God will be my God. I want to go back to Bethlehem with you. I want to be buried with you. In other words, she was committing herself completely to Naomi and to the God of Naomi. And I believe that was the moment when she was converted. And so these 2 women then, Ruth and Naomi, go back to Bethlehem. And as they arrive at the end of chapter 1, we see that scene where Naomi's walking into town and all the people that knew her 10 years ago look and they say, is this Naomi? And she says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because I'm bitter. Naomi meaning sweet or pleasant, and Mara meaning bitter. I'm bitter because I went away full, and the Lord brought me back empty. So that's kind of the end of chapter 1. And then we see in chapter 2, Ruth decides it's time to go do something. And so she says, I'm going to go glean in a field and see if we can get some food. There were two things really that Naomi and Ruth needed. They needed food and they needed a family. And so Ruth took it upon herself, being an industrious woman. I'm going to go and see if there's a field where someone will let me glean. So she happens, through God's providence, to end up in the field of Boaz. Boaz is a godly guy, and they're harvesting barley. So she shows up, and she works hard, and she happens to catch the eye of Boaz. So she happens to be in Boaz's field. She happens to be there on the day Boaz shows up, and she happens to catch his eye. Coincidence? I don't think so. And so Ruth is working, and she's like striving, and it's the stuff that dreams are made of. Boaz kind of sees her, and he's really intrigued by her, and invites her to come and sit down with him and his workers while they eat, which is kind of unheard of. At the end of the day, she walks home with a big old bag of grain on her back, and leftover doggy bags from the dinner she'd had with Boaz and the workers. She comes home to Naomi, and Naomi says, well, whose field were you in? And she says, well, I was in Boaz's field. And that's when Naomi goes, oh, that's perfect. He's a kinsman redeemer. He's one of our relatives. You need to stay with him and stay with his servant girls and glean in his fields, and don't go to any other field, because she's a Moabite. And Moabites were treated really badly by people of Israel during that day. And so this is a safe place for you to be. It's a secure place for you to be. He's a good guy. You need to stay with him. And then we come to the end of chapter 2, which is the most anticlimactic end of the chapter that we've had so far, when it says so she kept going back to the field and Boaz and all this other great stuff, and then she continued to live with her mother-in-law. And that was kind of the end of chapter 2. And so up to this point, things are going, okay. One of the things that we said that they needed, Ruth and Naomi needed, was food, and they've got food. But when it comes to the family part, there's still this big emptiness. There's a big void. And so we're going to start with Ruth chapter 3. Now, I want to tell you, when you preach through a book of the Bible, you just kind of got to take the good, the bad, and the ugly. And not that there's any bad in the Bible, and really probably not any. There's a little bit of ugly, but this was a hard chapter to get through, because there's some things that are going to happen in here. Some of you already know because you've been reading, and so I'm glad you've been reading. But you're sitting there smirking. I see you. You're smirking. You're thinking, what is this kid going to say about this? Well, here we go. Buckle up, buttercup. It's going to get hot. All right. So we're just going to read through this, and I want to read through it the way that the original hearers maybe read through it, and we'll stop and talk a little bit about what's going on here. But let's just get started. Ruth chapter 3, verse 1. You guys got this back there? Because yes. Oh, awesome. I love those guys. Who is it today? Is that Caleb? No, and Evan. Nice job, Evan. All right. Okay, so one day, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, talking to Ruth, my daughter, should I not try to find a home for you where you will be well provided for? Is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you have been, a kinsman of ours? Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. I want to stop there for a second. What Naomi is saying is literally, Ruth, I'm worried about you. And in some biblical translations, it reads like this: my daughter, should I not try to find a place of rest for you? The idea here is this, that Naomi wants to make sure that Ruth is taken care of. Ruth is a Moabite, she's young, she's a widow. It's just not a good situation. And as all this time has gone by, and they've got enough grain now probably to last them for the rest of the year, but they still don't have a family. And what she's literally saying is, in that day, is that Ruth, you need a husband. You need someone that you can count on, that will walk through life with you and help to take care of you in the way that a loving husband would do. And so she talks about the fact that Boaz is going to be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Now, I want to explain that just a little bit. So what they would do is, at the end of the harvest, they would bring out all the sheaves, and then they would and this is an oversimplified explanation of this, but you'll get it. They would throw the grain and the sheaves on the ground, and then they would take a winnowing fork, and usually it was in the evening when the wind would kick up. You know how that happens when the temperature is changing? It would be up against the hillside, kind of in a secluded area, and they would throw the grain up in the air. The wind would catch the husks of the grain and blow those away, and then the kernel of the grain or the barley would just land on the ground. Now, this was a great day for any farmer, because this was the day when you finally had a really clear understanding of just how good the harvest was and what payday was going to be like. So this was a day that these harvesters look forward to all season long. And so she's kind of describing, this is what's going to be happening. She knew that Boaz was going to be at the threshing floor. And I want to tell you, this entire chapter takes place in the middle of the night. So there's here we go. Okay. So, verse 3. Wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know that you were there until he has finished eating and drinking. Now, this phrase is not just wash and perfume yourself. It's not just about, Ruth, you smell bad because you work hard, and, you need to smell good and look pretty if you're going to get some man's attention. It's different than that. It seems like that to us, but in that culture, there's actually a phrasing. That phrasing is the exact same phrasing used in 2 Samuel chapter 12 when David was in mourning for his deceased son. And then as he came to the end of his time of grief, then he washed and put oil on and new clothes and perfumed himself. And it was a way of indicating to the people around him that he was done with his season of grieving, and now he's ready to move on. And so really what Ruth is indicating by doing this is she's saying, I am done with my season of grieving over my deceased husband, and I'm ready to have a relationship. Right? So she's kind of making it known. This is a little bit like maybe getting on eHarmony or ChristianMingle.com or whatever, right? It's a little bit like that. Go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you're there until he's finished eating or drinking. Okay, so let's look at verse 4. Now oh boy. Okay, when he lies down, note the place where he's lying. Now this is important. I'll get to that in a second. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. Yep. Let me just ask you, moms and dads, would you ever tell your daughter Now, okay. My wife, she said, there's got to be something. This has got to be like some kind of Hebrew tradition. And look, no, okay? The narrator of Ruth, there are 3 phrases in here which are specifically designed to heighten the significance of the sexual tension in this story. This is the whole purpose. There are 3 things in here that will cause any good Hebrew mommy to cover the ears of their Hebrew kids, right? Wait till he lies down, uncover his feet, and then lie down next to him. It is what it looks like. This is exactly it, right? This is Naomi's big solution, her big scheme. So, verse 5 and 6, I will do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. It went like this. Verse 7, when Boaz had finished eating and drinking, and he wasn't getting drunk. Did I mention that? That's not what the reference is not that. Like he was always all drunk, and this isn't like Lot, okay? It's just, what she was saying is not, wait till he gets drunk and then take advantage of him. She was just saying, guys are in a better mood when they've had a good meal. So wait until he'll thresh all day, and then he'll eat something, he'll drink something, and then he'll be in a good mood, and he'll go lie down. That's when you want to make your move. So when he'd finished eating and drinking, he was in good spirits. He went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. So they're already in a secluded area, and he goes, not by coincidence, he goes over to the far end of the grain pile where it's more secluded. And Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Wow. She did it. Now, I want to go back just a little bit when she says, when he lies down, note the place where he's lying. And I think the reason what Naomi was saying was, Ruth, don't get this wrong. Don't uncover the feet of the wrong guy, right? Could you imagine? Oops, wrong feet. Oh, boy. Let me cover those back up for you. Anyway, so... you put yourself in the position of Ruth. And if you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about. You ever had a sick kid or a kid that didn't want to go to sleep or whatever, and you pat them on the back or rub their belly or whatever. You just try to get them to calm down and go to sleep, and you're holding on to them, and you're just waiting for them to go to sleep, and you see their little eyes that were wide open start to turn into little slits, and then pretty soon you think they're asleep, and just when you think they're asleep, and you're kind of trying to slide up, and they're like, what? And I can see Ruth over there. She's watching Boaz. Is he asleep? Is he asleep? And then he rolls over, and not yet. So she's waiting, and finally he's asleep. Verse 8, in the middle of the night, something startled the man. Now, most biblical scholars would tell you that it was probably the cool breeze on bare legs. That would startle me. And he turned and he discovered a woman lying on his feet. Now, I want you to think about Boaz for a second. So you're laying there asleep. This happened to me not too long ago. I was laying there kind of real early morning, and all of a sudden, you have that sensation like somebody's watching you. And I open my eyes, and there's Elias. Dad, what? You want to make me breakfast? Yeah, in 2 hours. Go to bed, So here's Boaz, and he's asleep, and then all of a sudden he wakes up. Something startles him. He wakes up, and and there's two eyes just looking right at him. And his response in verse 9 has made me laugh all week long. He says, "Who are you?" Now, here's the thing. When we get to heaven, if you want to see me, you're going to have to wait. Because one of the things that's on the top of my list is I am going to get Ruth and Boaz and Naomi in a room together. Because I want to know more details. This doesn't tell me how he said it, right? Did he say it surprised, who are you? Or did he say it indignant, who are you? Or, it was kind of quiet and, maybe the moon was out. Maybe he got all... You know what I'm saying? Who are you? Yeah, I don't know. I want to know. She responds, and this is important. She responds, she says, "I am your servant Ruth." Now, I want you to look at that. That word, servant, it's the same word in English that they use in chapter 2 when he met Ruth for the first time, right? But when she used the word servant in chapter 2 is a Hebrew word that literally means lowest rung on the ladder, slave. That's what that means. But the Hebrew word here, we translate it servant. Some of your translations will be different, but the NIV translates it servant. But it literally means to be someone who is prepared to have a relationship with you, right? That's different. It's a different kind of idea. So she goes from being just this person you've never met before, this Moabite gleaning in your fields, to now, Boaz, I am someone who is prepared to have a relationship on a whole other level with you. Now, at this point, she's followed Naomi's instructions pretty much to the letter. Go, watch him. When he goes to sleep, sneak over, uncover his legs, lay down next to him, and then wait for him to tell you what to do. Those were the instructions, right? And so he asks, "Who are you?" Fair enough. She tells him who she is. But then she does something, she completely goes off the rails. And she decides, she just takes matters into her own hands. The last part of Ruth 3:9 says this, "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer." So now all of a sudden, she not only tells him who she is, she tells him what she wants him to do. Now this is all kind of poetic language to us, but literally what this meant to the Hebrew audience that was hearing it for the first time is literally, I want you to spread your protection and provision over me. you are my kinsman redeemer, and I just want to let you know that I am interested in you pursuing me in marriage. It wasn't an outright proposal, but it was as close as you could get and still stay within the lines, right? She's way off of Naomi's plan at this point. She was never supposed to say that. Remember, she was just supposed to be quiet and just let him tell her what to do. And we're kind of, at this point, I'm stressing in the story. I'm like, oh boy, this is really risky because she could lose everything. I mean, he could send her away and say, look, just you get away from me. You're not supposed to be here. You leave and don't ever come back to my field again. He could bring her up in front of the leadership at the city gate, and she could be publicly humiliated and shamed. She's already an outcast. This is hugely risky behavior. And so at this point in the story, I'm just sitting there thinking, wow, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? Well, if you've been reading, you know. Ruth 3:10, the Lord bless you, my daughter. And we all sigh a collective sigh of relief. He replied, this kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. Now, this is important. I haven't really talked about this yet, but he's indicated all the way through by calling her his daughter that he's older than she is. And here he makes it absolutely crystal clear that he is significantly older than Ruth is. And he uses a word here, this kindness. Now that word kindness, he uses it there's a couple of different places he uses it. He uses it here and he also uses it in Ruth chapter 2 when he's talking about her kindness towards Naomi. Now, it's interesting, I remember listening to Dr. Hunt when he would talk about how there are certain words that wouldn't translate into English as well as other languages. Like Dr. Hunt spoke 6 different languages, and he would come and preach here and talk to us, and I get a chance to visit with him. And he would talk about how there are certain languages where certain verses just translated better because there are different words that mean different things. This is one of those words. This is one of those words that in the original Hebrew, the word is hesed. And what hesed means, it does mean kindness, no question about it, but that's a very superficial understanding of the word. Some translations will translate the word into loving kindness, which is probably a lot closer, right? This kind of deeper kindness that we have. But really, it involves so much more than that. It involves mercy and loyalty. It involves sacrifice and selflessness. It's this idea that, the kind of kindness that you would demonstrate in a very tangible and real and sacrificial way. It's just one of those words that you just can't really translate very well into English. We don't really have a word for that. And so what he's saying is this hesed is greater than what you showed earlier with regard to Naomi. You have not run after the younger men, rich or poor. What he's indicating here is that he is astonished that this beautiful Ruth is interested in him. He's just stunned. And so this is great. He goes on in verse 11 and says, now, my daughter, don't be afraid. Okay, not afraid. I will do for you all you ask. And he says this about her, all my fellow townsmen know that you're a woman of noble character. That phrase, woman of noble character, if you are familiar with Proverbs 31, the last part of that is oftentimes called the virtuous woman or the woman of noble character. It's a passage that describes a woman of noble character. What's interesting, in our Bible, Ruth comes before Proverbs. But in the original Hebrew Bible, the books were kind of arranged differently. And there's some debate among biblical scholars as to how the books came. Of course, all the books that we have are the ones they had, but what order they were in. But most agree that Proverbs was the last book of wisdom, and then the first book of what they called the writings, it was the book of Ruth. So what's really cool about that is that in Proverbs 31, the last chapter of the book of Proverbs describes this virtuous woman, right? This noble woman in detail. And then Ruth is kind of like a living picture of that. And the Hebrews that were hearing this story would understand that very clearly. They'd understand the connection between the two. A wife of noble character, who can find? Proverbs 31:10 says, she is worth far more than rubies. And then towards the end of the chapter, it goes on to say, give her the reward she has earned, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. The idea is very clear that the people in Boaz's community, although she's a Moabite, they still recognize that she is a good lady, a noble woman with noble character. So he goes on in and so we think this. We think, good. Don't click yet. Hold tight. So I'm thinking at this point, this is perfect. This is great, right? She's willing to get married. He wants to marry her. He's happy. She's happy. It's like the wedding bells are starting to ring, and we're going to go to the chapel, and it's good, right? Until verse 12. And Boaz says this, verse 12, go ahead. There we go. The bummer verse. Although it is true that I am near of kin, there is a kinsman redeemer nearer than I. You see, the law provided that someone could come in and basically purchase and marry the deceased man's estate and marry his wife. But there was an order to that. And what Boaz is saying is yes, I am eligible for that, but there's a guy who's in line before me based on birth. This is the integrity of Boaz at its highest level. He's already declared how much he loves her. He's already declared how excited he would be to be her kinsman redeemer. But he says, Ruth, we've got to do this right. We've got to do this right. There's another man. Hate it when there's another man. So here's what he says, verse 13. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem, good. Let him redeem. Now listen to this. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. So lie here until morning. What Boaz is saying, look, we've got to do this right. We've got to, let this guy make a decision. But if he says no thanks, I promise you, on all that I am, I will take care of you. And isn't that a great story? We just love that. So verse 14, she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. In other words, I want you to get up, go back in the middle of the night. That's a bad idea. You could get hurt, it's just not a good idea. Go back in the early morning before anybody's really awake, and we'll just keep this whole thing between us. Right? Nobody needs to know what happened tonight. And then he said in verse 15, bring me the shawl you're wearing and hold it out. And when she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and put it on her. And then went back to town. Now, I want you to picture this, all right? We don't know what a measure is. A measure is a scoop, okay? It's a scoop. It could be like a little scoop or I don't know. We don't know how much it is, but he had to put it on her, all right? This is the idea that he was, and I think you'll get this. So he measures out 6, I'm going to say big scoops, right? Big shovel scoops of barley into the thing, and he puts it on. Now, Ruth is stout. Remember? She took between 30 and 50 pounds, her first day, 30 and 50 pounds of grain back to Naomi that day. And she's been gleaning in the fields for 6 to 8 weeks now through the barley and wheat harvest. I mean, this is not a little girl. Ruth can carry some grain. And he had to put it on her. I mean, it was a big, and there's a reason for that, and we'll get to that in a second. So now, you think about that night. I don't think Ruth or Boaz got any sleep that night. Boaz is thinking to himself, all right, tomorrow I got to go talk to this guy and see what he says. Because really it's up to him whether or not he redeems or not. And then I've got to go to the city gate and I've got to declare my love for this Moabite woman. And then Ruth, she's laying there and she's thinking, within 24 hours, I'm going to know who I'm married to. It's either going to be Boaz or it's going to be this other guy. I imagine both of them laid awake all night long. But you know who else probably didn't get any sleep that night? Naomi. Can you imagine? I mean, just praying and thinking, and every once in a while looking out the window. Is she coming back? Is it good news, bad news? Because this had a lot to do with Naomi. It was her idea, first of all, and you know she loved Ruth. But if Boaz was agreeable, it meant they would be set. And if he was disagreeable, that might be it. Word got around, and then it would just be, this was a big, big risk. So verse 16, when Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did it go, my daughter?" Now that phrase, "how did it go," literally translates, "Who are you?" It's the same exact words that Boaz used earlier when he woke up. Who are you? Meaning this, are you the Moabite? Or are you Boaz's bride? How did it go? What happened? How did it turn out? Really, this book of Ruth that's the question all the way through the whole book of Ruth. Is she the Moabite? Because she's looking an awful lot like an Israelite. And so then she told her everything Boaz had done for her. And then there's one more part to this. It's really interesting. The narrator doesn't share it in the original conversation between Ruth and Boaz when he was shoveling grain into her scarf, but Ruth mentions it here, and it's really pretty awesome. I love this. She says in verse 17, and added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" That word empty, we've seen that before, haven't we? Remember chapter 1? "Call me Mara, because I went away full, but I came back empty." What Boaz was saying was, I want Naomi to know that I'm going to take care of her. And she is never going to be empty again. So here's 6 measures of grain to make the point. Now at this point, poor Naomi, right? She's sitting there in the house waiting. Ruth's not signed up on Twitter, so there's no updates coming through, right? She just has to wait. She has to just patiently wait and wait. So she does. And Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter," verse 18, "wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." And that is the last we will hear from Ruth or Naomi for the rest of the book. They are literally stuck, waiting for God. There's nothing more they can do. Boaz is in the same boat. There's nothing really he can do. Just wait on the Lord. Just wait and see. Let's see what happens. In the first service, I had a lady say, "That's it?" She was sitting right back there. It's like, well, did she marry him or not? I'm like, you have to read the book, I guess. And somebody ratted her out. I couldn't believe it. Told the story. But read the book. Or come back next week. You'll find out. So I want to talk a little bit, just briefly, about this idea of the indescribable love of God based on this story. And I'm not going to reveal anything that's really earth-shattering or new, but maybe I can remind you of some things about real love and what real love looks like. And the first thing I want you to get is this, that love is patient. Now, I know you might think, well, Ruth wasn't particularly patient. She went to the threshing floor and uncovered that was pretty forward, right? But think about before that. Week after week, coming back to the fields, week after week, gleaning in the fields, waiting and watching and paying attention, waiting for Boaz to make a decision about whether or not to pursue her in marriage. Love is patient. Love is patient. In the last verse in that chapter, we need to just wait. You just have to wait. You just have to wait. Ruth, just wait. It'll be okay. Just wait. It'll get taken care of. You just have to wait. And I want to tell you, man, waiting is one of those things that we just have a hard time doing these days. Did you know that you can go to McDonald's On your way there, you can order your food on your phone. And you can walk in and it's sitting on the counter. You don't even have to talk to anybody. You just walk in, it's paid for, just sitting there. I mean, how are they going to make that any faster, right? Are they going to like teleport it into your mouth or something? I don't know. We live in a culture where waiting is are you kidding? Wait? Except for the DMV. I don't know how those guys get away with that, but love is patient. Love waits. And for some of you, God's love has been waiting for a long time for you to respond. Love also protects. We see this 3 different ways in Ruth chapter 3. In verse 1, Naomi said, "My daughter, should I not try and find a home for you where you'll be well provided for?" What Naomi is saying is, Ruth, I want to protect you. This is a hard world. And, and Bethlehem is a tough place, especially for an outcast like a Moabite. I want to do something to help protect you. I'm not going to live forever. I want to do something to help you. We see it again in verse 9 when Ruth says, "I'm your servant, Ruth. Now spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer." She's saying, I want you to be more than just a husband to me. I want you to take care of me and Naomi. She's looking to protect Naomi. So Naomi was trying to protect Ruth, and Ruth is trying to protect Naomi. And then in verse 11, we see that Boaz vows to protect both of them when he says, "Don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask." Because love protects. Love protects. And then Boaz shows his protection for her when he says, "Stay here. Don't go back when it's dark. You stay here. And when you go back, we just won't talk about this with anybody." Protecting her reputation. But love is not only protects, but it's also pure. And this is a picture of purity in a culture that was well known for impurity. You remember at the end of the book of Judges where the last sentence says, "In those days Israel had no king, so everyone did just as he saw fit." Here we have a couple who are obviously romantically in love with each other in a secluded place in the middle of the night. And the culture of the day would have been just do whatever you want to do. I mean, they're there and she's all perfumed up and beautiful and he's all handsome and winnowed out and he's ready to... And it would have been really easy, but I want to be clear. The Bible makes it very, very clear in this story that both Ruth and Boaz left the threshing floor with their integrity intact. And this is a culture in our day where that's super rare. My wife and daughter really like to watch HGTV, I used to like to watch it too, but then I started working on my house and it just makes me mad. They build a whole house in an hour. I'm like, really? Really? Yesterday it took me an hour to put one piece of trim up on the side of my house because I have an old house. But one of the things I've noticed on that show a lot is that there's a lot of shows where they're buying their first house, And so you have this couple, and they've been dating for a while, and they want to buy a house and get it all set up and move in because in a year or so they're thinking about getting married. Over and over and over again. Matter of fact, it's really rare to see a couple who's no, she's living at her mom's house and he's living at his parents' house, and they're going to buy a house, and then once they buy the house, then they're going to get married, and then they're going to move into it. You just don't see that. And for me, it's become almost, well, that's just the way it is. And here's my daughter Ainsley, and she's watching this, and I want to say to her, honey, it's not supposed to be that way. You're supposed to get married, and then you buy the house and move in. Or you buy the house, but you get married, and then you move in. Move in after you get married. But watch it sometime. It's so rare. And Ainsley's like, yeah, be quiet. They're putting the kitchen cabinets in. I want to see that. And she doesn't do that. But my point is this. Love is pure. Look, God's way isn't always the most convenient. It certainly isn't, deny yourself is what Jesus said. You deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me. Deny yourself means you do what's right even if you don't like it. Love is pure, but it also provides. The demonstration of provision was pretty clear in verse 15 when he shoveled 6 measures into her shawl. This is what love does. Love is more than just, hey, I get this warm, fuzzy feeling. I mean, how long did that last, honestly? Right? Football season, maybe, right? After you got married? Love is, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to provide for you. I am not going to abandon you. Love provides. And finally, love has a price. True love always has a price. I love Elizabeth Elliot's book. If you ever get a chance to read it, you should. Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens. For the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." It costs to love, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. If you've loved anyone for very long, you know that it costs to love. It's hard. Costs sleep. Costs money. Costs peace. Right? Anxiety and stress always comes with that kind of love. It costs. Costs a little bit of reputation sometimes to love somebody. Take a couple hits. People are thinking, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with your kid? Why is your spouse like that? It costs. True love always has a price. And no one understands that more than God. He loved you so much that he gave his one and only son. That was his price for love. You'll never earn it. You'll never deserve it. But if you'll believe in him, if you will surrender yourself, if you will put yourself under his wing, then you will live forever in his presence. True love always has a price. So today, I just wanted to remind you of that. God loves you so much. And he wants to provide for you. And he has already paid the price. You just have to receive it. So this morning, I want to encourage you, think about those things.